On to our next speaker. I am very pleased to present Oleksandr Yavorskyi. He is a project manager at Deep Knowledge Group. Oleksandr is a mathematician with a pharma background who is focusing on leveraging big data and machine learning in order to create predictive analytics and database market insights for longevity financial advisors, which you will also hear from later on today. Longevity Financial Advisors is the world's first, longevity-focused capital advisory firm, combining different ML-based approaches, and he also leads on the next generation of customized IT platforms for venture capital and private equity. Oleksandr is interested in mathematical and AI applications in investment, finance, banking, and also other areas. And I believe you speak 6 languages fluently, which include Chinese, Ukrainian, and German, which is amazing. Right. I wouldn't expect anything less. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone, and thank you, Nikita. My name is Oleksandr, and yes, mentioned I'm a project manager at Deep Knowledge Group, and my today's talk is about alternative data and how we can use it for private companies. So as was mentioned, alternative data might be used in different cases, yet it might be complicated to use satellite images or foot traffic all the time. Fortunately, there are other types of alternative data that might be useful when investing in private companies. Another complication that we might encounter here is that albeit public and private companies have alternative data, that's for sure, but we cannot approach these companies in the same way, not only because due to the financial aspects, but also because the alternative data itself differs for public and private equity. So another problems that we have is that data scarcity in the case of private companies is much higher. The private companies are startups most of the time, which leads to absence of cash flow most of the time. And funding is one of the main financial metric, tends to be deceiving in many cases. What are the solutions, to these problems? First and foremost, most of the time there is no need to approach private companies the same way we do with the public companies. For the data scarcity, hopefully and fortunately, we have alternative data. The same can be said about the funding. We can use alternative data in technical due diligence in order to overcome this problem. And as for the absence of cash flow, is technology due diligence that can shed some light on what's going on with the company, what are the prospects of the given company and its future. So when we're talking about data, most of the time right now, as was mentioned by Nikita earlier, we're interested in big data, right? So I did a small case study for you just to see whether it's possible, to aggregate big alternative data. So I've chosen the cancer vaccines as a topic. Most of the time when you work with alternative data, one way or another, you end up in a situation where you need to apply a natural language processing and ML technique, which allows you to, go through the text and extract certain relations to understand what's going on in the text, in a news article, or scientific article, and anything else. Let's imagine that our, algorithm is capable of extracting around one relation per 100 words. It's not that great. Many algorithms, in fact, can do much better. But let's say we use something simple. According to Google, we have around 1 million articles for cancer vaccines, which leads to the 5 million relations if we would use this algorithm, right? And definitely that's obvious that we would exclude certain, relations, but still we will end up in a situation having around, 100 or 200,000 of relations, which is most of the time pretty enough to feed to any machine learning algorithm, even if it's a greedy algorithm. This is for the volume. So sorry, just forget to mention that when we're talking about big data, we are talking about it in the case of 3 V's, so-called 3 V's framework. So it's volume, velocity, and variety. So we're good with volume, right? We're good with the relations, As for the velocity, we have 72 news being posted on cancer vaccines topic just on Saturday, Saturday evening, which is around, every 20 minutes. So it's pretty high frequency data if we would compare it to the, let's say, hourly updated stock prices, right? So it's quite great. And as for the variety, hopefully, especially compared to the, let's call it direct data, for alternative data, we have tens of types of data. This leads us to another problem: how we should gather this data, how we should streamline this data, right? How we should assess this data, and how to derive meaning, from this data. So, in order to get value from the data, we need to think about three things. It's not like the truth itself, but it's something close to. So when we're thinking about the data, and we should begin with the data always, if we're thinking about machine learning and application of machine learning to any area, we should think about the intelligent data aggregation, and we should apply strict data management pipeline. And I would like to insist on this data management pipeline, because without understanding what's going on with your data, you won't be able to use it in any case. After that, we need to apply natural language processing and so-called classic machine learning. It's not a scientific, approved definition, classic machine learning. But by classic machine learning, I just mean certain techniques that tend to apply rather numerical data in order to, derive certain conclusions rather than textual data. Why we need this? Once again, because alternative data, most of the time, it's not a numerical data, right? It might be a photo, it might be some text, it might be, video, audio, whatever. So it might be something that is not yet, not yet transformed to the numerical form. Then we need to derive meaning somehow, right? So for this particular purpose, we need to use an experimental approach. An experimental approach, what does it mean? It basically means that there are no such thing as predefined way of assessing the information, or being sure that certain result is actually the result you are looking for, right? So you need to build hypothesis, not only statistical hypothesis, like scientific hypothesis. And in order to build such hypothesis, you need to deeply understand what's going on with your data. Is it like meaningful to use certain data in order to predict certain certain behavior? And this once again implies that you need to have very strict data management, because since you try to use alternative data, right, you end up in a situation having different types of data. When we work with something financial, and numerical data, it's one way or another, already defined why this particular data, why this particular metric has sense. But for alternative data, no such predefined thing exists. So you need to do this yourself. And this once again leads us to this data management pipeline. That is really important when dealing with alternative data. What types of data we can use anyway? So this graph, this picture, it's definitely not the best visualization of alternative data we can use, and definitely it's not like the whole list we can use, because we can use probably whatever data you want. There is no restrictions unless it make any sense. But I've just tried to comprise certain points and examples of the data we can probably use for different cases. So first and foremost, it's economy-related data. By economy-related data, I do not mean any let's say GDP price, GDP time series or something like that. It's more about the policy. So for example, ESG, it's a great example, right, of the policy that different companies seem to apply. And this is definitely a great example of alternative data and how we can use this data in order to predict the future development of the company, to assess it somehow. Then finance related. So as for the finance related data, here we have different types of time series, that's for sure. But it's obvious that all of us tend to use financial time series. That's what we do in finance. So here I rather mean certain time series that are not financial time series by definition, but that have certain correlation, with the financial time series. For example, there are certain correlations between the average temperature and the average temperature growth and productivity of the workforce, right? There are certain correlations made in the same way, not with temperature, but with humidity and many other things. So basically, these are the time series we might be interested in when analyzing alternative data. Then knowledge-related things. Basically, that's pretty easy. It's IP, any type of IP. It might be IP by definition, meaning the patent, or the scientific article, but it also might be any type of article or information that is produced by a given company. And at the end of the day, it's business-related things. It's as an example, might be in use, but I don't want to narrow this in too much, because it's not only about news articles like press release, because press release is rather direct data. It's more about, let's say, Facebook comments, or more about Twitter threads, or I don't know, Instagram posts. So it's something that is related to how business is perceived by other people, by customers, potential customers, or by by people who are against this type of business. And for example, I'm pretty sure Philip Morris have a lot of them. So you need to assess their point of view somehow and do it numerically. But when we think about alternative data, why don't we use only humans, right? So why don't we just hire a couple of guys and say, okay, there is a task, you need to provide me with some understanding of what's going on with a given company based on alternative data. There are basically a couple of things that might be done better by machines. For example, a machine had higher data aggregation volume, but at the same time, people tend to have better data strategy, right? Machines can combine what cannot be combined, meaning that they can do this because of for example, data volume analysis, right? So a given machine can go through let's say, millions and millions of data points in a matter of seconds, which is impossible for human. I mean, probably it's possible to scan through, but without no minutes, so we cannot do calculation this fast most of the time. Also, but at the same time, humans tend to have meaningful results when they do their work, and we definitely do not have any black boxes. So we can describe, and we can show how exactly we came up with a certain idea most of the time. Moreover, machines can be described, not moreover, but in general, machine can be described as jack of all trades, right? And at the same time, humans are rather narrow experts in specific areas. So it's better to say that we need to apply, we don't need to compare humans and machines. We need to use them jointly. So it's not the human versus the machine, it's rather the human and the machine. So the point here is that we cannot exclude, at least for now, people and analysts from the data aggregation process, or data management process, or data analysis process. So alternative data cannot be fully, let's say, analyzed and fully governed by machine only, while certain direct data, let's say stock prices, it might be, yeah, you can probably create a certain policy that will be applied by a machine, so machine learning algorithm, for example, in order to create certain data-driven insights. And you don't need to interfere in this process anymore once you have created it. With alternative data, unfortunately, as for now, we cannot do it this way. So how we could apply this data? So basically, it's a great example with the public traded companies, but I will talk about private too. So this is a great article by Peter Hayek and Joseph Novotny, where they have applied natural language processing. Namely, they have applied sentiment analysis, as far as I recall, in order to predict gold prices, and then they have created a trading algorithm that uses these sentiment analysis only from 5 sources, as far as I recall, in order to make decisions about trading. And it can be seen here that basically their algorithm called Furia outperformed all other approaches, and most of them quite significantly, and had generated a average annual revenue around 24%, which is great, yeah, right? But how it can be used for private companies. So first and foremost, it's more efficient M&As and allocations by VCs, family offices, syndicates, whatever you call it. After that, it's niche markets. They would get more attention, including the financial attention, and it's a big problem for people to get into the niche markets, because most of the time it requires high level of expertise, and not all VC funds are capable of hiring, let's say, 10 chemists in order to understand whether a given company is a great investment target, an expedient investment target or not. Right? But definitely the future development of the alternative data for private equity, private companies has certain drawbacks. For example, we might end up in a situation having even higher data scarcity, because if a given company, let's say, understands that, okay, we cannot be private anymore, and be safe from the let's say competitors' data aggregation, they are able to extract meaning even in the cases where direct data is absent. So they might, implement certain informational policies and clothe themselves even more, and do not post anything and do not interact that much. But it might be not the biggest problem. The biggest problem might be the information-based biases and threats. For example, as data poisoning, right? Since alternative data compared to the direct data in the case of private companies has much greater amount, it's much easier to produce such data, there is a high risk that a certain company might producing the information that is not only it's not only objective information, but it's also like it's definitely poisoned, right? And this might create certain biases when try to implement certain assessment models for private companies. Okay, we at DKG are not only interested in this type of thing from the theoretical point of view, but we also trying to build our own models. And I wanted to show you something that we have built and how it works, in order to make a, let's say, a showcase, a case study for you based on our development. So basically, we're interested in the creation of an algorithm that is capable of analyzing private equity. We are gathering around 170 parameters, and then we build around 10 unique SWOT metrics. We visualize it as a SWOT, as you can see here. Why this is a great thing? Because we can create a multi-dimensional comparison of the data. We can analyze everything from team composition up to economy-related metrics, the scientific advances, the trends of the websites, whether people like their website, whether a given company is popular among their target audience or not. And definitely it helps us to optimize data aggregation, because as I mentioned before, it's really hard to make some analysts to go through 1 million scientific articles or 1 million news articles and derive some meaning and do it in a matter of days. But for NLP algorithm, it can be done in a matter of hours, right? So this is definitely a great thing. If you want to create something that is capable of assessing private companies based on alternative data. So how exactly this can be applied, and for which cases this can be applied? So 4 cases mainly: funding, due diligence, business development, and competitors analysis. So as for the funding, we believe that this approach, this application of alternative data for private companies could help startups and any other companies find investors with greater ease, because it's much easier to pitch your product or pitch your company if you are able to show a multidimensional comparison and say, hey guys, we are not only good at business development because we have found you, or we are not only cool because we are doing a great thing, we also are much better at economy, we're much better at IP, we're much better at many other positions. And if it could be analyzed holistically, this creates a certain framework other investors might, benchmark you with, and basically made a more quantitative, more data-driven decisions, as it is done right now for public companies, public equity, right? At the same time, for due diligence process, it's much easier for investor to, use certain alternative database framework in order to analyze companies. So, for example, in our case, we only have like 170 parameters, and it's quite a task for anyone to write down these parameters first and foremost, and then gather the information. Because when you're trying to analyze company, you're not only analyzing one company when you're doing due diligence, right? You analyze a number of companies in order to understand whether this company, stands out in comparison to its peers or competitors, right? So using alternative data, using machine learning, it's possible to analyze multiple companies at the same time, and spending around a couple of minutes. So this is really what saves investors their time, save their money. As for the competitors analysis, as for the companies themselves, right? So there are two applications: BizDev and competitors analysis. So for the companies, if they have this multidimensional framework, it might help them find their value proposition. And we do believe that market research can be, ameliorated and enhanced significantly by companies applying different types of alternative data frameworks, because they might understand their competitors better, their peers better, and understand what is the product they want to create and want to sell. And the last but not the least is definitely collaboration between the companies, because it's really important when you launch in a startup to understand who might be your friend, not only competitor, right? In order to, for example, create a JV or create a, make an acquisition if you have money, or, merge, in order to create more resilient market player and, make better business. Okay, that's it. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Thank you very much, Oleksandr. Very, very grateful for the time that you've taken and the effort to share your thoughts and experience with us. And of course, we will be able to return and discuss more about your key points during the panel session later on today.